Hello everyone, thanks for coming outside me today. Today we're out here on this blustery summer afternoon to talk about peep height and peep diameter as it relates to you changing from an index style to a handheld style release. So one thing that's become really common now in the past 1, 2, 3 years is using a handheld style release for every aspect of the sport, and particularly hinge style releases. If you watch guys like John Dudley or Chris B, they use their handheld hinge style release or thumb button release for everything. Indoors, outdoors, 3D, hunting, it does not matter. And a lot of people want to try something new, and they're coming into a lot of different speed bumps along the way that no one really talks about when you go from a index style to a handheld style release. So I want to touch on some of the biggies today, and hopefully it'll help you long before you encounter those issues, and you can fix them or address them when you switch over to a different style release. So all of these rules that I'm going to kind of go over are pretty vanilla in the sense that they are going to cover every brand and every manufacturer, whether you're going to stick within the same brand. For example, these are two different Scott releases. I have the Scott Ascent hinge and the Scott Jaws, which is an index caliper, dual jaw caliper release. Whether you're shooting a Scott or a True Ball or a Carter, whatever it may be, the rules are going to apply. And the first rule is understanding that when you go from an index style to a handheld style, often your draw length, or at least your D-loop length, is going to need to change. And you might think, well, aren't I still going to anchor and come back to the same place? Well, yes, you are, but now you have drastically changed the neck length from the hook of the jaw, no matter what type of release you're shooting, to where it rests inside your fingers. So I'm going to hold this Scott Ascent exactly the same way I would hold it when I'm going to fire it here deep inside my knuckles. And then I'm going to push up and extend the Jaws 2 here of where it would be at full draw, and you can see the drastic length change. Right, it is very obvious that the Jaws has a much longer shank, and where it would actually clip onto the D-loop is a much further distance away from your hand. This means you can get away with that short draw length. If your bow is not perfectly set up for you, you can kind of fudge your draw length a little bit with an index style release. Whereas with that handheld style release, if you're starting off with that short draw and you pull this thing back, it's gonna feel even tighter and it's gonna feel even shorter. And that, of course, is no good. It's very common for people to have to increase their D-loop length 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch at least, if not change their draw length up to 1/2 an inch. Me, and I have a couple bows here I will pull up in a moment, I have to change almost by 1/2 an inch. 1/4 inch really is about the sweet spot for me, going longer, switching from that index style to a handheld style release. That is rule number one when it comes to looking at handheld style releases. It's going to change your anchor point first and foremost, but it's also probably going to change your draw length a little bit more than you think it's going to. Let's talk about anchor point, because it's going to lead into the next point, which is peep height. When you anchor, quite commonly you anchor very low with a handheld style release. It's not very common that people anchor up here with a handheld style release, because the release is now in line up here with your knuckles, whereas the handheld, the wrist style, is down here. So that allows for that different peep height location. You actually have this jaw, as you quite often are anchored up much higher. I often put this knuckle in behind my earlobe there, and that'll bring this up. If I was to anchor up here, could you imagine my D-loop being right across this part of my face? My peep would be so low it almost touched the center serving. So it's quite common for a handheld style release. I like to put the webbing of my thumb here back inside my jaw, or even take the knuckle and a corner of the hinge release here and put it against my jaw. Everything's a little bit different depending on the person and the style of release that you're going to shoot, but it is almost a rule of thumb that you're going to be anchoring much lower with a handheld style than you are with a wrist index style release. All right, so let's pull up two bows here. I have two of my target bows, although one I do use for hunting. Here's the Elite Result. We're going to start with this one. This is a full target setup with the fancy sight, the bars, and the Hamsky drop weight, blah, blah, blah. I have it set off to a lower let-off percentage. I'm cruising right around 77%. But the big deal here is that my peep is set for a handheld style release in the case of the Scott Ascent here. So I'm going to come back to full draw and anchor. So I'm back here and I'm going to anchor really low on the jaw, right? So I'm really far down here and I'm a little bit on the long side, and I'll explain why in a second. And it'll be really prevalent when I pull up my Victory 39 here. Let's do it again. I'm a little bit on the long side, about 31 1/4. which allows for me to get that little bit of extra length. When I'm back there at full draw, this is a really comfortable locked in spot for me. If I was to anchor clear up here, let's actually pull the bow back and anchor, you would see how low my peep would have to be down on the string, closer to the D loop. And this is a very common place to anchor for a index style release, right? Like right up in here. Like look how high my peep is. If you're like me and you like shooting the different flavors of archery and you like changing up your release styles, for example, I shoot that Scott Ascent all through indoor and all through the 3D season until I get closer to that August-September time frame and I want to switch over to a handheld style release. I either shoot the Scott Ghost or the Scott Jaws, but either way, it's still that index style non-handheld style release model. So you'll notice here I still have a very long peep distance, and the reason being is I have set this bow up for a hinge style release, and it is long. It's coming in around 31.5 inches, so it's even a little bit longer than I would like for optimal comfort. But for shooting it with a wrist style release, I can get away with it because it's a lot easier to fudge. And I know there's going to be people, you shouldn't fudge your draw length and anchor point. For the hunting shots and for some of the hunting scenarios, yes, you can. If you're twisted up and around in a saddle or a tree stand, you're going to have to make accommodations anyway. So it's a lot easier to fudge the anchor point for your index style release. So let me point this out here. I talked earlier about how I really like to be up in here. I really like to have a higher anchor for an index style release, and a lot of people do as well. Now some like to anchor clear down here. Some guys back in the olden days even put their thumb behind their neck. But I like to anchor high, but I can't. If I anchor high here, if I anchor up where I usually anchor, that peep is again too high because I have this set up for a handheld style release. So I have to anchor lower, but still in the same vein. But I can do this because my draw length is long. My draw length is short, and I try to anchor up lower like this. You'll notice this is bad news bears. My draw length is longer, so it brings everything back. It brings the release back. It brings the V of the string back, and I can anchor much lower. And I can execute the shot that way. Now the other reason why I'm doing this is because I want to hunt with this bow. I have a rule in my house, I can't retire a bow or let a bow be just a target bow, even the blue one, until it has gone out and killed a deer. So I'm still trying to set these up for hunting. And that's why, even though it's traditionally a target and I have it set up, that peep height is set up with that handheld style in mind. So if you want my cheat, when you go to your local archery shop for them to press the bow and set the peep height in for you, take both releases with you or buy the handheld style release there that you're looking at getting and have them find that anchor point with you and set the peep height for that. Then if you're only owning the one bow, you can just fudge it back and forth. If you want to hunt with this during the season, you can, and you just have to change that anchor point down. It doesn't feel natural to me anyway to shoot a wrist style release that far back and that up close, that down towards my jaw. I like it nice and high and tight, but I have to make do if I'm going to be flipping back and forth. Worst case scenario, if you set up a bow with the wrist style and then want to shoot the handheld, I see this a lot. Let's imagine the peep is not there for a minute. I'm just going to anchor like I would usually do. Okay. Now let's say I go to shoot my handheld style release. Now the peep is right where it's supposed to be. It's low. Okay. So now if I go to anchor here, now I got to mash my face down in order to see through that peep because it's low, because it's set up, right? We're envisioning this peep's not here, right? So here I am. I'm right where I want to be for that index style. And now when I go to do that handheld style, now I got to like mash my face down in here to get to see through the peep, okay? That is not ideal whatsoever. That face pressure is nearly impossible to tune for. So you can go from a handheld style peep height to a wrist style peep height, but you can't do the inverse. If you try to set up a high anchor, low peep, wrist sight, and then you try to anchor down here for a handheld and then mash your face down in here to see through that peep, that is going to be a tuning nightmare. I guarantee it. You can do one way, but you can't do it the other. It's kind of like how we were all in grade school and we learned the whole all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares gig. You guys remember that? All right, so I barked on about this long enough. If you have any questions about flipping from a handheld to a wrist style release and I didn't cover all the basics, or maybe you want to go a little bit more in depth, follow the links in the description below. Hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, send me an email, or even leave a comment with your question here on YouTube or your experience here on YouTube for everybody to learn from. Hope you're able to get outside, enjoy the sport of archery hunting if you so choose. Definitely enjoy God's beautiful creation. The wind's died down, maybe I can get a shot off. We'll get to see you next time.